Hello, welcome to Story Starters. My name is Miss Kayla, the children's librarian at the Dubuque County Library, and the book that I've got with me today is a newer one. It's called Granted by John David Anderson. So I'll read the first few chapters and you can listen at home. Granted. The last time you blew out your birthday candles, what did you wish for? Did you blow them all out on the first breath? It doesn't count otherwise. Also, do not let your brother or sister help you. At best, they will waste your wish. At worst, they will steal it for themselves. Same for dandelions, the one breath rule, or else the wish won't fly. It's harder than you think, getting all those seeds off in one huff. Harder than candles on a cake. If you can't manage it, though, don't worry. There are a dozen more ways to make a wish. A quarter flipped into a fountain. A penny dropped down a well. Some might tell you that bigger coins make stronger wishes, but that's simply not true. A silver dollar, or even a gold doubloon, doesn't increase the chances you'll get what you want. Your dollar is better spent on gumballs or ice cream. Use a nickel instead. Wishes aren't for sale to the highest bidder. A shooting star, or maybe just an airplane passing overhead. It's hard to tell. What was that wish for? You needn't wait for one to streak by. The truth is, any star will do, so long as it's the first one you spot. Just don't sing the song. You know the one. It grates on the nerves after a while. Maybe you keep a wishing stone in your jacket pocket, rubbed smooth by time and worry, the circle of your thumb going round and round as you shut your eyes and hope. Don't. You're better off skipping the stone across a lake. Wishes are temporary things. You can't keep them in your coat and ask for them whenever you please. That would be unfair, and the wish-granting process is nothing if not fair. Wishes are made in moments of wonder and desperation. Wishes are prayers without the salutation and minus an amen. Did you know that you can wish on a horse? But it has to be all white or all black, no patches or spots. A pony will do in a pinch. In contrary to popular opinion, you do not have to see its tail. Or wait until Thanksgiving and dig through the picked clean carcass of that cooked bird to find the bone, shaped nothing like a wish, for wishes have no shape except for the one you give them. Looking more like a pair of tweezers, or a U that's trying very hard to become a V. The bigger half is the one that counts, of course, and no fair breaking it all by yourself. Wishing is competitive. There's only so much magic to go around, and less as time goes by, it seems. Feathers, yawns, and falling leaves, acorns and necklace clasps, four-leaf clovers. Yes, they can be wished on, but no, they aren't good luck. Neither are rabbit's feet, at least not for the rabbit. Eyelashes? Yes, but only if they fall out on their own, and you happen to catch them on your fingertip. Plucked lashes are instantly disqualified. The first rainbow of spring, spotted through the window of your moving car. You point it out, and your mother tells you to make a wish on it. Go ahead, but keep it to yourself. Telling ruins it, and it makes Mom feel bad if she knows it will never come true. Though she can't possibly know, not for certain, even though the odds are against you. Some wishes do get granted, just not near as many as before. Perhaps you are partly to blame for that. Or maybe it's some fault in the system. Or maybe that's just how it has to be. The last time you blew out your candles, what did you wish for? Did you get it? Chapter 1. The lottery was in less than an hour. and Ophelia still hadn't waxed her wings. Her hair, as cobalt blue as the flower from which she was born, and just as delicate and fine, was brushed, of course, her bangs pinned back, her uniform pressed, buttons polished, collar cinched so tight it was hard to swallow. Her boots showed little sign of wear, all the scuffs carefully buffed away, but her wings she simply hadn't gotten to yet. Probably not an issue. There were no long-distance flights in her future, after all. But if anything could be said of Ophelia Delphinium Fidgets, it would be that she was always prepared, that she worried over every minor detail. Some fairies called her fussy. She preferred the word meticulous. When she was born, pulled from the dense cluster of dewdropped flowers in Mrs. Haversack's back garden, she looked at her founder and immediately brushed the pollen grains off his shoulder. They bothered her, sitting there, impertinent and messy. Tidy, that's how she liked things. At the age of nearly nothing, she was all about the particulars. Nothing out of place for this fairy. Never. That's how she'd risen in the ranks so quickly. The youngest ever to graduate from the academy. Top marks. A certified field agent at the age of 4. A grantor. Which is why it was a little bothersome to her that she wasn't ready for work yet. Normally, she would be sitting in her chair by now, on her third bowl of honeyed oats, staring at the clock, waiting for Charlie to pick her up so they could commute to work. Not that she needed the company. He was the one who insisted. Ophelia's cottage in the treetops was on his way. Ophelia didn't mind being alone, at least most days. Grantors almost always flew solo. Sometimes it's best if you have to count only on yourself, even if it means you will have only yourself to blame. She reached into her cabinet and pulled out her jar of liquid beeswax and the bit of cotton that she used to spread it, cautious not to get the stuff on her fingers. It was nearly impossible to wash off completely and made your skin slicker than snot. For the rest of the morning, she would fumble at door handles and have things slip out of her hands if she wasn't careful. On wings, though, it did wonders, especially if you were traveling in bad weather. Not that she would know. It had been nearly a year since she'd graduated, and in that time she'd made only brief forays outside the haven, training exercises mostly, some cleanup detail, but no actual mission. Not the thing she had trained for. Ophelia Delphinium Fidgets was a grantor, yes, but she still hadn't made her first wish come true. Chapter 2. She was Delphinium first, Fidget second, Ophelia third. When fairies are born, North American fairies at least, they are given their names in stages, not all at once. The middle is always the first. Fairy ritual is seldom logical, and is simply the name of the flower, bush, or tree they are born from. For fairies, as everyone knows, are creatures of nature in the most intimate sense, sprung from magic and beauty and wisdom, and even more specifically, sprouted from lilacs, pine trees, and mulberry bushes, though there were several fairies, Ophelia thought, who must have sprung from tree stumps or boulders for all the sense they had. A leaf unfurls, a flower's petal parts, and there, uncurling alongside and stretching his or her sun-blessed limbs, is a fairy in the flesh. Perhaps you've seen it happen, though you wouldn't know it. Fairies are nothing if not stealthy and quick-witted, and a touch mischievous. The flower or tree a fairy springs from undoubtedly says something about her, contributes to her personality. Fairies emerge from redwood trees a little stouter than those stemming from phlox. Pansy-plucked fairies have a more delicate disposition than those born from bamboo. Certain plants are more likely to harbor fairies in them as well. There are probably more fairies with the middle name of Rose than any other. Ophelia could count 6 in her department alone. Several with the middle name of Lily. Lots of tulips and violets and daffodils. Quite a few oaks and maples and birches. Delphinium was a rare middle name for a fairy, which suited Ophelia just fine. A fairy's last name is given by his or her founder, the fairy who came to the outside world and brought the newborn sprite back to the haven before she could be eaten by a goshawk or snatched by a fox, or, worst of all, spotted by a prying human. The founders are responsible for overseeing the care of new fairies, at least until they are able to care for themselves, which isn't that long, as fairies are naturally precautious and grow up quickly. As such, founders are the first to see a new fairy's personality surface, to pick up on her quirks and tics, her penchants and predilections. Often, that's where a last name comes from. Ophelia's founder immediately noticed her messing with his buttons and baubles, tugging on the loose threads of his uniform, wriggling and writhing in his arms. She couldn't be still, even as a newborn, and so it didn't take him long to figure out what her last name should be. "Fidgety little worm, this one," he said when he returned her to the haven, bringing her home. And so she was, Delphinium Fidgets. As for her first name, that was simply a matter of luck. A fairy's first name was drawn out of a hat, though not a literal hat. That's just to say that it was chosen completely at random. More and more things are like that in the haven, much to some fairies' dismay. Ophelia felt fortunate to have her name. She liked the way the F sounds crashed together, like a hard rain. She liked the mouthfulness of it. A name so long you almost had to take a breath in between. Better than May Rose Crier, the fairy who ran the switchboards and was prone to sobbing jags. And much better than Argus Fothergill Gaspasser. His founder must have been sensitive to smells to have given Argus such an unfortunate moniker, though Ophelia could affirm from experience that his last name was well earned. Gus Gaspasser could clear a room faster than you could wish for a breath of fresh air. Then there was Billy Lily Shrill, who could hear from a mile away. Sometimes a name could tell you almost everything you needed to know about a fairy. Sometimes it just gave you a hint, like Charlie. Charlie Rhododendron Whistler. It was also a bit of a mouthful, Ophelia admitted, though it didn't have quite the same ring as her own. He was a bit of a handful. That's sort of why she liked him. Chapter 3. He was late, as usual. She could hear him outside the door. Fairies have exceptional hearing, like many small creatures of nature, bats and rats and owls and cats. Their ears pointed slightly at the tips, arcing forward, sticking out like birch tree leaves. Ophelia's ears were especially large for her head, maybe too much, taking away from the otherwise perfect symmetry of her face. She frankly didn't care for them. "Are you ready?" Charlie called out as he knocked. "The lottery starts in less than a talk." Ophelia looked at the Maplewood clock on her mantel, at the little talker hand so close to the 8 already, the longer, faster ticker marching reliably along. "You're the reason we're late," she shouted, putting down her empty bowl. Every morning he insisted on picking her up. Every morning she shouted that he was responsible for their tardiness. Every morning they had to fly extra fast to make it to work on time. But she didn't mind that part. She liked flying fast. Ophelia opened the door and found her colleague and friend, perhaps her only real friend, disheveled as usual, his bright pink hair in ruffled tufts, his acorn-hued skin chafed rosy from the wind. She licked 2 fingers and reached up to try to smooth out a particularly ornery cowlick in front, but it wouldn't lie flat. Nothing about Charlie could be easily tamed. "Would you please just leave it alone?" he told her, batting her hands away. You aren't my founder." "If I was, I would have named you Charlie Rhododendron Scruffret." She looked him over, uniform wrinkled and untucked, stain on his pants. Even his wings looked ragged. "When's the last time you bothered to polish those boots? When's the last time you spent the day in your pajamas sitting on the porch, drinking wine, burping out loud, and watching the clouds slink by?" he asked back. "Never." "Exactly. And you don't know what you're missing. And you don't know what a hairbrush is for," Ophelia chided. "I know what it's for. I just don't happen to own one, is all." He was mocking her, she knew. It was like this every time he showed up at her door. She would make some weak attempt to straighten him out, and he would poke fun at her dustless bookshelves and trimmed eyebrows. "I like what you've done with the place," he said, eyeing her mostly empty cottage, the clean bare walls, the carefully polished wood furniture. "What's this hard stuff beneath my feet again?" "It's called the floor," Ophelia quipped. "You have one at your house, too, underneath all the junk. Come on." Ophelia stepped outside and looked at the sky. Just below the treetops, it was cloudy, a little overcast, but above it, it was bright and blue and warm, a perfect day for flying. All around her, the other fairies of the haven were taking wing, all dressed in the uniform of their respective guild: builders and growers, gatherers and harvesters, teachers and bakers and menders and makers, founders and whisperers and alchemists, but only a few granters. In fact, Ophelia and Charlie were the only two in this part of the tops. The thought gave her a shiver of pride, as it always did. To be a granter was the greatest thing a fairy could aspire to. Every other fairy relied on the granters to keep the magic flowing, and, in turn, to keep the haven safe. It was the most noble of occupations, provided you ever got around to doing your job. Ophelia closed and locked her door. Nobody in the haven ever stole anything, of course. It was just one more thing for her to be fastidious about. There was little to fret over in the haven, really. Whatever Mother Nature couldn't provide, the industrious faithful produced for themselves and then shared without question. Locking her door was simply a matter of habit, part of her morning ritual. Fairies are fond of rituals. She took a deep breath, picking out the sweet tang of sugar maple trees tinged with a whiff of cinnamon that must be coming from the baker the next branch over. Nowhere else smelled quite like the haven either, though admittedly Charlie's cottage had its own peculiar aroma. Despite what she told Charlie, there were some days when she thought she could just sit on her porch for hours, breathing it in. Ophelia's fellow granter reached into the rugged canvas bag he had slung over his shoulder and removed a pair of goggles that he'd fashioned out of some scavenged glass and a smelted paperclip. Very little in the haven was 100% fairy made anymore, Those clever humans threw too much good stuff away, not to take advantage of it. The goggles made Charlie's pink eyes loom almost twice as large as before. Rose-colored glasses, Ophelia called them, as if he needed to look goofier. It feels like a good day, he said, a lucky day. I think we're going to grant at least 50 wishes today. What do you think? Ophelia shrugged. That part wasn't up to her. The tree would decide, as it always did. She'd be happy to grant just one. She gave her wings a ruffle and then did some stretches, cracking her neck and knuckles. Bet you can't beat me there. Bet you're right, he answered. Ophelia rolled her eyes, then opened her wings to full bloom, letting the sun warm them for just a moment before launching into the sky. There were only a few sounds she liked better than the sudden stream of air, of wind blasting past her ears on takeoff. Behind her, she could hear the steady hum of Charlie's wings, which was barely audible beneath the spriteful, high-pitched melody of his whistling. I will stop there. So that was the first few chapters of Granted by John David Anderson. We've got this book at the library, so if you haven't read it before and would like to find out what happens, stop by and check it out. If you would like to join us for the live story starters, they're on Wednesdays at noon for the time being through the end of May. And you can register for that on our website, dubcolib.org, for Dubuque County Library District in Dubuque, Iowa. Thank you for listening in today. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.